Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first.
For the duration of my time on certain medication, I had unsettling, recurring dreams, usually fitting a similar pattern of beats and locations. Now that I've been off that shit for 2 months and I may be on the other end of withdrawal, I can recount the most lucid iteration. You're on vacation with family. Somewhere familiar, somewhere near the water. You're at the lot that leads down a sandy hill to the beach, your family already at the water. You blink. The water is now up to your ankles, waves lapping gently against your bare feet. You're still at the top of the hill, and your family is gone. You look to your right, and along the new shore you see an old salt mill, sunken in the distance. You blink. You're standing on a rusted beam, fall line around your waist, looking down at people lowering themselves down to the water's surface on secure lines. They're not your family, but you trust them with your life. You blink. The water is up to your ankles. You look up through the caved-in ceiling. Suddenly your perspective consumes the horizon, as if you were flying, but you are not in control. Your vision soars over the land, tearing itself apart over less and less. You see smoke rising from the cities. You watch the clouds turn black around you. You blink. The water is at your ankles. You are standing on a platform of fine smoky black quartz, just under the water's surface. Steps lead up to other platforms, shown to be enormous free-floating stones, spiraling around a central hexagonal pillar. You know, suddenly, with perfect clarity, that this is her place. The smiling lady looking down from her tower meets your eyes and you try to shut yours, but they're already closed and you know this is only a dream, but you can't wake up fast enough to stop her from rushing down towards you as the water rises over the tip of your nose and you can't breathe until you wake up. It would be different locations, different crises, but yeah, fuck those pills.
Be me. 6 years old. Mom left dad cause he was a textbook abuser. She wised up and fled back to her home state with me in tow. Moves to a house in the middle of nowhere, lots of vegetation and forests but nothing else. Probably scared dad would find her otherwise. Move into a cheap old house that had recently been renovated. Falling asleep the first month we were there. Need to pee. Get up and head for the bathroom. Once the main vein is sufficiently bled, I pack up and head back for my bed. Enter the hallway and there stands death. It looks like my dad but off. I think it was the smile. To my memory my dad never smiled so wide that all of his teeth were countable. I'm getting bad vibes and I can't move or speak. Scared dad is going to hurt mom again. Walks over to me. Bends down. Almost at a complete 90-degree angle meeting my eyes. Want to live with me now, kiddo? This isn't my dad. He never called me kiddo, buddy, son, or any other nickname some dads affix to their young sons. No smile turns into anger. He screams like the weird mix of a bull and a boar. Raises his fists up and brings them down at me. I scream and fall to the ground and start to cry in the fetal position. Mom finds me and asks what's going on. Tell her. Assumes I was sleepwalking and asks if I want to sleep with her that night. I do. Other things happen but I don't really remember them well since this happened when I was 6/7 and we were only there for the year lease. Be now 25 years old. Talk to mom and stepdad about house. Mom tells me that after I was asleep I came to the door smiling wide. Asked to sleep with her tonight. Mom doesn't know what to do since I was already right there next to her. Just starts saying get out of my house. Thing gets angry and charges at her. She wakes up the next morning.
Hop here. Once again, thanks to everyone who contributed. Without you, X is nothing. I'll share a personal story now. This is all from memory, so it'll be a rough sketch. It's not really about me though, but about my friend, Elijah. Grow up in East Texas. I'm a small kid and a bookworm, which makes me kind of an outcast in elementary. No friends. Feels bad man. JPG. In 6th grade I meet Elijah. His family is from Louisiana and he's super Cajun. He uses French words all the time, has a funny accent, and is a great storyteller. He's also athletic and a good-looking kid, so he's pretty popular. Somehow we get along great. He tells me all about his grandfather, Papa, who apparently gets a lot of sick people visiting him all the time. Papa prays over them and heals them. This sounded like some X-Men shit to my young brain, so I was fascinated. Fast forward to the summer after 6th grade. Elijah's going back to Louisiana to visit family. Since I have no other friends, I spend the summer reading. He comes back in August and invites me over to his house, says he has to tell me something important about Papa. Hell yeah, more X-Men stories. When I show up, Elijah tells me that Papa passed on the healing powers to him. Not going to lie, I was kind of jealous when he said this. I wanted to be an X-Man. Why not me? Papa told me that he's going to die soon, and he needed to pass on the healing to someone. Normally a man passes it on to a young girl, and a woman passes it on to a young boy, but Papa broke the rule because he couldn't find anybody to pass it on to. Apparently nobody wants to be a healer anymore because it's a very hard life. They aren't allowed to charge money because it's against tradition, so they just have to rely on the kindness of those they heal. Most people go to them because they can't afford doctors, so they normally don't pay anything. Most healers are very poor as a result. Show me the power, I say. I can't. I can only use it if someone is sick and needs it, but I'll tell you how I got it. Papa brought Elijah into a room, just the two of them, and Elijah memorized a bunch of prayers in French. As Elijah's memorizing them, it feels like someone gently forces him off his chair and down to his knees. He feels his arms being lifted up high above his head, and a warm feeling fills his body. He lowers his head, almost afraid. He turns his hands so they're palm side up, and something that feels like warm liquid pours into them. Elijah thinks Papa is pouring warm water into his hands at first, but he turns his head slightly and sees him still sitting a few feet away. After a while, the feeling goes away and Elijah stands back up. Papa says, "Now you have the power." Fast forward to later that day. A neighbor woman showed up with her crying child. He fell and broke his leg. Papa tells Elijah to use a certain prayer while laying his hands on the boy's broken leg. Elijah starts feeling the same warmth as before all throughout his body. This time the warmth quickly goes into his hands and they feel like they are burning. Elijah prays until he feels the burning leave his hands and the boy is no longer crying. The woman thanks them both and gives Papa a bowl of rice. After I heard this, I used to bug Elijah all the time about showing me his healing power, but he always refused. I began to suspect that it was just one of his stories, but then something happened just before he moved away. 8th grade gym class. The coach is in his office not paying attention as usual while the kids play basketball. Elijah's team is winning, and I'm just sitting on the bleachers reading when I hear a scream. I look up. Holy F. One of the kids is on the floor holding his leg. It's snapped at the shin. Never seen anything like that in person. Can't look away. Everyone is freaking out and Elijah pushes them all back and kneels next to the kid. He places his hand on the kid's leg as the kid is screaming. Oh shit, X-Men time. Coach is hurrying over at this point. I get up off the bleachers and run over when suddenly. Gasp. Everybody gasps in unison. The whole gym is effing silent as Elijah pulls the kid up from the ground. His leg is completely fine. Coach chews them out for causing a scene over nothing. Oddly enough, people started hating Elijah after this. He became a total pariah, which he didn't actually seem to mind since he and I were best friends. We hung out by ourselves the rest of that year until his family moved back to Louisiana that summer. We eventually lost touch, and I went back to having no friends, which I don't really mind either. After all, I've got you, X. Anyway, please feel free to keep contributing. I'm enjoying all of these reads.
Here's one my father has told people every time someone brings up demons or paranormal activity. Rural area in Maine. There's an old abandoned house a field away from a back road outside of town. Sometimes you can see it from the road. Sometimes it's not there at all. One night when my father was in his 20s, him and a couple of his friends went to explore the house and see if any of the rumors were true. The house was supposedly cursed with black magic. Town officials hold seances in the basement and sacrifice animals and people in an attempt to gain dark power and summon demons. It being invisible sometimes is also a rumor. It's there. Doesn't seem magical from a distance. As my father and his 3 friends start walking up the porch, my father is filled with a flight or fight response that unnerves him deeply. Guys, what if there's hobo junkies or a predator animal? We gotta at least open the front door, man, don't be a pussy. One of my father's friends, Dan, is leading the 4 of them. As he creaks open the door, he winces in disgust. Oh man, it smells horrible in here. As they gather in the entry room, my father smells it too. It smells like a rotting corpse, something he had experienced in the woods when he was younger. Dead deer. His spidey senses are going fucking nuts. Leave, 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 go, 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 go. Guys, we should just leave, this doesn't feel right. Relax, man, it's probably a dead raccoon or something. My father notices there is random chicken wire all over the house at first glance. Like some critter used to live in the house and the chicken wire kept it from going where the owner didn't want it to. But it's set up tall. Human height. One of the guys says, "What the fuck is with this fencing shit?" The same dread my father has been feeling suddenly hits the group. Something is rustling and moving upstairs. Dan says, "Fuck it, let's go see what that is, then we'll leave." The staircase is at the center of the building with walls on both sides. All anyone can see upstairs is off-white wall with some water stains. Dan starts going first. My father is in last place at the bottom of the stairs. He looks towards the kitchen and notices some of the chicken wire has long black hair on it. Too long to be any animal he's heard of. He looks back to the stairs as Dan is finally reaching the top. Dan, the courageous tough guy, peeks to the left and stops in his tracks. He turns around white as a ghost. He's hyperventilating and starting to cry. We need to. Everyone starts running for their lives before he can even finish his sentence. My father is the first one out of the building, and as the others follow, Dan starts shouting, "Run, run, run, get back to the fucking car." As they pile in and leave in a panic, Dan is now crying like a baby. "What the F did you see, man?" Now trying to choke back tears in a state severe post-trauma distress, Dan starts struggling to describe. "It was like a fucking pig, man. A giant fucking pig. What the fuck?" He snaps a bit. But it was a dude. Walking like a person with hair and shit. He starts really sobbing and breaks down a bit. "It's fucking eyes, man. It was like stealing my soul. It had no fucking eyes." He just keeps crying like a baby as everyone sits in bewilderment. They never speak of it again. Too terrified of what is even happening at the house. My father says years later Dan killed himself after a long downward spiral that started that day. As if it really did steal his soul. He can't sit through any media related to pigs or demons without feeling deeply unnerved, like when he first started walking up to the house. "I have the body of a pig" utterly terrifies him as well. He refuses to ever watch it again.
Delivery driver. Working for a party supplies business in Albuquerque. Occasionally, deliveries require out-of-state driving. Get tasked with a delivery to Amarillo, Texas. 4-hour drive each way, decide I'll get to work early and drive straight there with no break. This will give me some time around lunch to hit up the Big Texan, pig related. It's a famous steakhouse. Never been there and have always wanted to go. Pull up to work at 5 a.m., load up the truck, and an hour later I'm on the road. Playing classic country the whole way to set the mood. One thing I didn't anticipate was a major wreck about 2 hours out. 18-wheeler turned over blocking the entire interstate. Takes forever for them to move it. I lose over an hour this way. By the time I get to Amarillo it's almost noon. Rush to my destination and unload the truck as fast as possible. 1 o'clock, I don't have time for the Big Texan. Fuck that. I came all this way, I'm going. It's begun to storm pretty bad, but my little 15-footer drives like a dream and Gary Stewart's on the radio warbling out, drinking thing. I might even order a couple beers at lunch, fuck it. GPS says the Big Texan is up ahead on the right. Thinking I'm probably going to catch the tail end of the lunch rush because of the stupid delay. Pull into the parking lot, and it's just an old abandoned building with a large porch out front, no cars in sight, and no Big Texan anywhere. Double check GPS, I'm where I should be. I shut off the truck and run through the rain to the front of the building onto the front porch. I peer inside through the door windows. Empty fucking interior. Guess I won't be eating at the Big Texan today, god damn it. Flash of lightning and clap of thunder startles me. I jump. The very next second I'm looking at half-full parking lot, sun is shining. I turn around and the hostess is looking at me, surprised. Table for one? She asks. Yeah. Sit down and order a big-ass steak and a couple of beers. Finally look at my watch, thinking I'm going to catch hell if I'm late getting back. It's almost 1 o'clock. That can't be right, it was 1 p.m. when I left the delivery. I ask the server, what's the time? And he points to a clock on the wall and says, 1 o'clock. Sure enough, that's what it says. I pay my tab and leave a fat tip. GTFO, hop in the truck, and turn on some country tunes. As I'm driving away it starts to rain and Gary Stewart's warbling out drinking thing on the radio. My face when. Get back just in time and boss can't bitch. Thank you based country music gods.
10 or 11 years old. In Boy Scouts, on week-long group camping trip with my whole troop and some parents as chaperones. Campground is a series of wooden shacks, wooden bunk beds on 3 sides with the 4th side totally open, tarp hung over to keep wind rain out. 4th night, go to sleep as normal. My spot was the top bunk in the back. Wake up in the middle of the night. Poke head up and see I'm in a different bunk, now on the top right side. Sleeping bag feels different, the stuff I kept around the top of my bunk isn't there. No idea what time it was. Notice weird lights coming from outside, small beams that appear to move on an axis. No pattern, but it kept this up the entire time I was conscious. Look in towards the center of the shack, see some kind of figure standing there, in silhouette. Head is tall and squared off, looked like 4 to 5 feet tall, head was looking down. Body looked mostly humanish, but small for how big the head was. Watch this thing for what feels like hours, but probably much less than that. Scared shitless, too afraid to move or do anything. Eventually put my head back down and try to go back to sleep, wake up in the morning in my usual spot. Probably just a dream, but definitely the weirdest one I've ever had. Also, by far and away the longest. When I remember my dreams, I remember only brief flashes and feelings, but this is different. I remember feeling around for my stuff, looking outside, down at the creature, back outside again, going back and forth a few times. One thing I wish I had done in hindsight was take stock of myself. I wonder if I was transported into the other kid's bunk, or if we had switched bodies or something.
12 years old. Summertime, so no school and mom's making mac and cheese for lunch. Life is good. I'm reading my favorite book by my bedroom window. Something blocks the light. I look up and see a blurry, dark gray figure standing there. No matter how long I look, it doesn't get less blurry. The light around it is blinding me. Suddenly hear my mom crying and screaming in the other room. Not normal screams, she sounds like she's getting stabbed to death. Hear my aunt's voice too. The blurry figure is suddenly gone. Feeling scared. Mom. Mom stops crying. Aunt says, "Did you hear that?" They both rush into my room and Mom stares at me, shocked. She looks like shit, tears streaming down her face, boogers running down her nose. She runs over to me and pulls me into her arms, sobbing. She just keeps saying, "Thank you God, thank you Jesus, thank you, thank you." Turns out I was missing for an hour. I couldn't ever rationalize this event. It would be one thing if my mom was just freaking out, but my aunt lived next door to us at the time and she came over immediately and helped my mom look for me. They looked everywhere and couldn't find me.
I had a friend whose grandpa fled Ireland after a falling out with the IRA or something. I'd come totally clueless about that Irish troubles shit. The point is that his grandpa immigrated to the States and started a new life. The story was a bit of a family secret, and in the end, my friend's father never told my friend about it. This led to a fucked up situation. My friend has just completed an undergrad degree. He decides he wants to take some time off and travel. He'd heard his dad talk about a specific little town in Ireland a few times, supposedly where his family was originally from. He decides to seek out this little town. Fast forward. Friend lands in the UK, rents a car, and sets out on his journey through the Irish countryside. The bonny banks of Loch Lomond.mp4. Friend arrives in town and is surprised at what he sees. It literally looks like two different historical eras staring at each other from opposite sides of the road. To his left, there's a sort of picturesque island. Small rustic buildings, old shops, a pub, and behind everything lies green fields and rolling hills. To his right it's a completely different story. Much more urban, McDonald's and strip centres and whatnot. Well, Janny Mac, but this looks strange. Friend parks the car and ventures into the old side of the road and enters the pub. There's one man inside alone sitting who instantly looks my friend up and down. Friend orders a beer and pays for it. As he's drinking, the man suddenly stands up and walks over to him. "What's your name?" My friend is surprised, but he tells him. "Your last name," the man's being really gruff, but my friend tells him, thinking there can be no harm. The man says, "You're a dead man," and exits the pub. The bartender, who overheard the conversation, tells my friend he needs to leave. He repeats my friend's last name and says they're not allowed in here. Confused, friend drinks the last of his beer and exits the pub. Outside, an old man approaches my friend. "Hello there, Anon." The old man is dressed nicely, but has a large scar on his right cheek. Friend asks the old man how he knows his name. "I knew your dad." "Oh, this must be one of his Irish relatives." The old man puts his hand on my friend's arm and looks seriously at him. "You're in a big trouble, boy. I can't protect you here. Get in that car of yours and park it across the road. And don't leave until I tell you." After some back and forth, my friend decides to do as he says. He parks across the street in a McDonald's parking lot. From there my friend sees that a group of young guys has gathered in front of the pub. They're watching him. Knock knock. It's old man knocking at the car window. My friend rolls it down. "I'm going across the road," he says, "and those men will follow me. When they do, you go home, and never come back here." The old man breaks out into a big smile suddenly and looks at my friend for a second. "You're all grown up now." The old man starts across the street. When he's on the other side, the group of guys notices him. The old man takes off running, and the guys hesitate for a second. They look at my friend, Then they all go off chasing the old man. My friend floors it and drives back into North Island and spends the rest of his trip mainly exploring England. When he gets home, he asks his dad about his family in Ireland, and Dad finally tells him everything. He shows him some old photos, and there's a photo of one of my dad's uncles who never left Ireland. He's young, but he bears a striking resemblance to the old man my friend met. He has a large scar on his right cheek. He died in a scuffle when my friend was only a child.
Here's one from living in rural South Carolina. I've got more if you'd like to hear. This happened a few years ago, when I was a community college student and still dating my now wife. I lived at my parents' house at the time, in a rural area of upstate SC. The area we lived in was rural, but not terribly sparsely populated. Our road had houses every few hundred feet, with thick bands of trees between them. Most other roads in the region were similar to this, houses every so often, with thick forest interspersed regularly. We lived 5 minutes from the closest town, however my college and GF's residence were in a larger town about 40 minutes away by the fastest route. This route was along just 3 of those sparsely populated roads, one after the other. Driving on this route would take you first to another small town around 20 minutes away, and then after 15 to 20 more to the larger city where my college was. If you were heading to the college, the first 10 minutes of your drive were guaranteed to be down a twisting, dark, and often empty road, with long stretches between clusters of houses. This road had an official name that can be found on a map, however, I'll call it what it was designated by the locals, Snake Road. Called so because of its winding nature, there were a few low spots along this road where at night it became particularly dark and hard to see, and sometimes foggy. In one of these low spots there was an area I always felt odd driving through, even in the daylight. If you looked out the window, the trees and underbrush were fairly sparse, but at the same time impossible to see more than a few meters into. It was almost as if the light was twisted and distorted by all of the branches and vines. At night the only visibility would come from my headlights, which were fortunately bright, modern ones that could illuminate several hundred feet in front of the car on most roads. But in this low-lying area, for reasons I never understood, they could never penetrate more than 70 or 80 feet into the thick shadows. One night, I had stayed late at my GF's house after class, as usual. I had tucked her in and was heading home in my car. At this point, everything was fine. I had a full tank of gas, my lights were in good condition, and I had some good CDs to listen to help me stay awake on my drive home. Although it was a long drive in daylight, with normal traffic, at night I could speed and so usually make it home a good bit faster. However, this reward of being in bed sooner came with the price of potentially running into deer or other nocturnal animals, which frequently crossed the roads at night. Deer were particularly threatening, as they are large enough here that if you strike them at any pace higher than a crawl, they will destroy your lights, radiator, bumper, and perhaps even parts of your engine or windshield. I had seen a deer jump into another car and shatter its window as a child, so I fully understood the threat and made sure to be as observant as possible when speeding home. I hastily drove out of the outskirts of the city where she lived and began to drive into the countryside. I watched as all the familiar turns passed me by, because I was still so close to the city many houses still had their lights on and I had passed a few cars. It was a typical night drive, and my biggest worries were a stray deer or sheriff's deputy. However, neither of these were particularly prescient at the moment because on the wide, well-maintained roads near the city my bright headlights made it easy for me to see along any stretch or curve, as well as several feet off to either side of the road. After around 15 minutes, I reached the small town that marked the midpoint of my darkened commute. I rolled through the stop sign in the middle of town and continued out into the countryside. I was making good time, and nothing out of the ordinary had occurred yet. However, I had to become more reliant on my lights, as the small town marked the end of the wide, well-maintained highway and the start of a narrower, darker portion, mostly surrounded by trees, farms, and the odd church, instead of neighborhoods, gas stations, and stores. The next 5 minutes of my drive were uneventful enough. At this point I was nearly on autopilot, singing along to an old Midnight Oil CD and watching my odometer tick onwards. After a long straight section where there were wide, cleared sections on either side where the grass ran to meet the forest hundreds of feet away from the road, I rounded the last bend and came upon my second to last turn. The turn onto Snake Road. I slowed down, as the junction with Snake Road was marked by a sharp hairpin where the ground dipped away swiftly on either side. Taking the turn too fast would send you careening into the ditch, a sign of the nature of the test of the road. As I turned, I followed the first steep, winding descent into a low-lying area with several farms in the vicinity. I had seen many deer in this area before, as they fed on the crops, and my headlights were also beginning to lose their piercing edge, as I mentioned previously. At this point I had slowed down to around 45 miles per hour, as I knew a slower pace was preferable to striking a deer and having to walk to find signal to call my parents. The road led up over another hill, past a large white house, and dipped once more into the darkest part of the road. This was the area I mentioned earlier, where even daylight was hazy and unreliable. Coming around a downward curve into the bottom, I was on a shorter straightaway, before a long left-hander into a longer straight and then a hill. It was here that I had my encounter. I saw movement up ahead, at the very end of the straight before it turned to the left. I instinctively slowed the car, as hitting a deer at 45 is enough to do serious damage. As I approached, I saw what I thought was a deer walking off of the road. I could see the vague shape of its head and antlers, as well as my lights reflecting from its eyes. But something was wrong. The deer's head was too low to the ground. Deer will frequently lower their heads to graze, so this isn't unusual, but if they're grazing their mouths will face downwards. This deer was almost lying on the ground, moving, and looking at me. Okay, I thought to myself, a scavenger is probably dragging away some roadkill. But as I approached, this was clearly not the case. I saw another set of eyes turn to look at me. Deer's eyes are big and green at night in headlights, because they reflect the color green. These eyes were small, and piercingly bright, like two coals. As I got closer, I saw an enormous shadow imposed over the deer carcass. It was about waist high, and pure black. Standing on all fours looking at me, its legs were thick, not fatty like a bear's, but sinewy like a dog's, only much thicker. Attached to the legs was a massive, pitch black muscular torso and powerful neck, easily holding the deer just off the ground. Throwing caution to the wind, I floored it. Any risks that might occur were surely lesser than whatever creature was staring right at me in my car. I whizzed past it, the whole encounter taking only a few seconds. I made it to my house several minutes later, ran inside and locked the door. The next day, I drove to school along the same route. In daylight I felt much safer and could try to catch a glimpse of whatever I had crossed paths with the night before. Driving past the same spot, I did not feel the same sense of dread the night before. I began to feel somewhat relieved, until I saw the deer carcass. What had previously been a good-sized animal was not simply a head, neck, and part of a ribcage. The rest was simply gone, torn clean off. Coyotes can't do that. Vultures merely pick corpses, they don't eat bones. And the bears around here are scavengers. Which leaves me wondering, what else is in those woods along Snake Road?
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.